On September 4, 2024, a quiet school day in Georgia turned into one of the state's deadliest school shootings in recent history. 4 innocent people, including 2 students and 2 beloved teachers, lost their lives. Several others were injured. Families were left devastated, and an entire community was forever changed. Now, nearly 2 years later, the teenager responsible has stood before a judge and admitted his guilt. There will be no trial. Instead, the courtroom became a place where grieving parents, wounded survivors, and heartbroken families confronted the young man whose actions changed their lives forever. This is the story of Colt Gray's guilty plea, the emotional victim statements, and what happens next. On the morning of September 4, 2024, students at Apalachee High School in Winder, Georgia, were attending classes like any other school day. Shortly before the violence began, investigators say 14-year-old Colt Gray arrived at school carrying an assault-style rifle concealed inside a poster board. According to investigators, Gray later left his classroom, entered a restroom, removed the rifle from its concealment, and began opening fire in the school's hallways and classrooms. The attack lasted only minutes, but those minutes would leave 4 people dead. 14-year-old Mason Shermahan, 14-year-old Christian Angulo, 39-year-old math teacher Richard Aspinwall, and 53-year-old teacher Christina Irami. 9 other people were wounded, including several students who suffered gunshot injuries. Teachers rushed to protect their students. Students barricaded classroom doors. Parents desperately waited outside the school, praying their children would emerge alive. For many families, that day never truly ended. As investigators searched Gray's home and electronic devices, they discovered evidence suggesting the attack had been planned well in advance. Police testified they found handwritten notes, sketches, and diagrams detailing parts of the school. Investigators also recovered writings describing the attack and references to the number of casualties Gray expected. Authorities say they also discovered what they described as a shrine dedicated to Nicholas Cruz, the gunman responsible for the 2018 Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida. During Friday's hearing, investigators explained that Gray's defense team was not disputing this evidence. Gray also told the judge that he had been receiving treatment for mental health issues and was taking prescribed medication. However, prosecutors argued that months of planning demonstrated intent and deliberation. The case attracted national attention for another reason. Gray's father, Colin Gray, also faced criminal charges. Earlier this year, a jury convicted him of second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and other charges after prosecutors argued he knowingly gave his son the rifle used in the shooting as a Christmas gift. Prosecutors told the jury that Colin Gray knew his son's mental health had deteriorated and failed to prevent the tragedy. They describe him as the one adult who could have stopped what happened. His sentencing is expected next week. The conviction marks one of only a handful of cases in American history where a parent has been held criminally responsible for a mass shooting carried out by their child. The case has reignited nationwide debate over parental responsibility, firearm access, and warning signs before acts of mass violence. Now 16 years old, Colt Gray appeared in court wearing jail clothing with his feet restrained by chains. He pleaded guilty to 55 criminal charges, including murder, aggravated assault, and other offenses. Because the plea was non-negotiated, there was no agreement regarding sentencing. Judge Nicholas Prim carefully questioned Gray to ensure he understood what he was doing. Each time, Gray quietly answered, "Yes, Your Honor." By pleading guilty, Gray waived his right to a jury trial and effectively accepted responsibility for the shooting. The only question remaining is his punishment. Georgia law requires a life sentence for murder. The judge must now decide whether Gray will ever become eligible for parole. The courtroom grew emotional as victims' families addressed Gray directly. Brianna Shermahan, the mother of 14-year-old Mason Shermahan, described waking every morning knowing her son would never come home. She said Colt Gray had stolen every birthday, every holiday, every graduation, every future milestone. Looking directly toward the defendant, she said, "I do not forgive you." She added that Mason deserved a future, and so did everyone who loved him. Richard Aspinwall's wife, Shayna, described the overwhelming loss her family continues to endure. She told the court that her daughters, who were only 5 and 2 years old when their father was killed, must now grow up without him. She said the future they planned together no longer exists. Calling the loss a life sentence of grief and trauma, she urged the judge to ensure Gray never receives parole. Christian Angulo's brother also addressed the courtroom. He said the shooting shattered thousands of lives in a single instant. Although the law prevents the death penalty because of Gray's age at the time of the crime, he argued the court should never allow Gray to return to society. Several surviving students also shared their experiences. One teenage survivor described seeing Gray standing in a doorway holding the rifle before realizing she had been shot. She recalled asking friends to call her brother because she wasn't sure she would survive. She underwent multiple surgeries and spent nearly a year unable to walk normally. Another survivor, Taylor Jones, told the court the trauma didn't end when the shooting stopped. She said anxiety consumed her life, and she no longer felt like a normal teenager. For these families, the emotional wounds remain long after the physical ones have begun to heal. Judge Nicholas Prim will continue hearing testimony before announcing Colt Gray's sentence. Under Georgia law, Gray will receive life in prison. The remaining question is whether he will ever become eligible for parole. Nearly every victim's family has asked the judge to sentence him to life without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, Colin Gray, the shooter's father, is also awaiting sentencing after his own conviction earlier this year. Together, these cases could reshape how prosecutors handle future school shootings involving minors and their parents. Legal experts believe the outcomes may influence criminal accountability in similar cases across the United States. Nearly 2 years have passed since the tragedy at Apalachee High School. But for the families who lost loved ones, time has not erased the pain. Friday's hearing was not simply about entering a guilty plea. It was about giving survivors and grieving families the chance to speak directly to the person responsible. For many of them, justice cannot restore what was taken. It can only ensure that those lives, and the lessons learned from this tragedy, are never forgotten. If you found this report informative, consider subscribing to the USA Report for in-depth coverage of major criminal cases, courtroom developments, and true crime stories from across America. Thank you for watching.